London, 1862. Amelia Kearsley clutched the morning newspaper with trembling hands, tears blurring the damning words before her. The society column, that vicious chronicle of the Tun's affairs, had branded her in permanent ink. The disgraced Miss Kearsley, once thought to be secured for young Lord Penrose, has proven herself utterly unfit for decent society. Sources confirm the gentleman discovered her in compromising correspondence with his own cousin. One wonders what respectable household would now risk such a woman's influence. The paper crumpled in her grip. 24 words had destroyed 3 years of careful reputation building since her father's death had left her and her mother in genteel poverty. 24 words, and not one of them true. Amelia! Her mother's voice floated up the narrow staircase of their modest Bloomsbury home. Has the post arrived? Amelia hastily wiped her eyes and tucked the newspaper beneath a cushion. No, mother. Nothing of importance. The lie tasted bitter, but necessary. Her mother's heart condition would not withstand this new catastrophe. Since father's passing, they had survived by the slimmest margins of respectability, Amelia's position as companion to elderly Lady Harrington providing just enough income for them to maintain appearances. A position that would surely be terminated once this gossip reached her employer. Amelia pressed her handkerchief against her mouth to stifle a sob. Lord Penrose had never offered for her. Indeed, she had rebuffed his increasingly inappropriate advances for months. His cousin existed only in his spurned imagination, a fiction created to salvage his pride. A knock at the door startled her. The landlady's voice called up, "Miss Kearsley? A messenger has arrived with a letter. Most urgent, he says." The envelope bore Lady Harrington's seal. Amelia's hand shook as she broke the wax. "Miss Kearsley, it is with great regret that I must terminate your employment, effective immediately. While I have found your services satisfactory, certain rumors have reached me which make your continued presence in my household impossible. I enclose 1 month's wages." Lady Harrington. 1 month's wages. 30 days before she and mother would face true destitution. Sebastian Thornfield, the Duke of Westmoreland, stared out the rain-streaked window of his London townhouse, a glass of brandy forgotten in his hand. The drawing-room behind him was silent save for the ticking of the mantel clock, a sound that had become unbearable in the year since Caroline's death. "Your Grace?" His butler, Jenkins, appeared at the doorway with the perfect blend of deference and urgency. "Lord Halloway has arrived." Sebastian nodded, not turning from the window. "Send him in." James Halloway entered with the brisk energy that had characterized him since their schooldays at Eton. "Sebastian, you look terrible." "Always the diplomat, James." Sebastian finally turned, gesturing to a chair. "What brings London's busiest barrister to my doorstep at this ungodly hour?" "It's 2 in the afternoon, James observed dryly, settling into the offered seat. "And I've come on a matter concerning your children." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "There is nothing to discuss." "On the contrary. 3 governesses in 8 months, Sebastian." The latest lasted barely a fortnight before fleeing in tears. "Lady Thornfield would, do not," Sebastian interrupted sharply, "presume to tell me what my wife would have wanted." James sighed, leaning forward. "Caroline was my cousin, Sebastian. I loved her too. But she would be heartbroken to see what's become of her children." Sebastian stared into his glass. The twins, Alice and Edward, had been 5 when Caroline died in childbirth, taking their infant brother with her. They had once been bright, laughing children. Now they were as silent as their father, 2 pale ghosts haunting the vast halls of Thornfield Park. "They need more than a stern governess reciting lessons," James continued. "They need someone who will help them live again." He withdrew a letter from his coat. "I've made inquiries. There's a young woman, no." Sebastian set down his glass. "I'll not have some society mistreating my children as an amusing diversion until she secures a husband. She's not a society miss. She's the daughter of Professor Kearsley, the mathematician. Oxford educated, though of course they wouldn't grant him a degree. The girl was raised on classical literature and higher mathematics. More importantly, she has a reputation for gentleness. Had a reputation, Sebastian corrected. I read the papers, James. Your candidate is the center of a scandal. James waved dismissively. Fabricated by Lord Penrose after she rejected his advances. I've investigated the matter thoroughly. And why would this paragon accept employment with us? If she's as virtuous as you claim, surely other positions are available. None that would pay enough to support both her and her invalid mother. And none that would remove her so completely from London society's vicious tongues. James laid the letter on the side table. She's desperate, Sebastian. As desperate as your children are for someone to care for them properly. After James departed, Sebastian unfolded the letter. Miss Amelia Kearsley's handwriting was neat and precise, her words carefully chosen. It revealed nothing of desperation, only quiet dignity in the face of misfortune. Against his better judgment, he found himself penning a reply. Thornfield Park loomed before Amelia like something from a Gothic novel, grey stone walls stretching toward a sky heavy with approaching storm clouds. The carriage had travelled for hours through increasingly wild countryside before turning onto the long drive lined with ancient oaks. Imposing, isn't it, miss? The coachman's voice startled her from her reverie. Yes, Amelia agreed, gathering her courage along with her modest luggage. But quite beautiful. Been in the family 400 years, they say. He helped her down. The Duke's not much for company these days, but the staff's decent enough. The massive front door swung open before she could knock, revealing a silver-haired butler with impeccable posture. Miss Kearsley, I presume? I am Winters, the butler. His Grace expected you earlier. The road was muddy from yesterday's rain, Amelia explained, stepping into a grand entrance hall that made her painfully aware of her travel-worn appearance. Indeed. Mrs. Harper, the housekeeper, will show you to your quarters. The children take their lessons in the East Wing schoolroom. His Grace wishes to see you in his study before dinner. Amelia followed the housekeeper up a grand staircase, past corridors lined with ancestral portraits. Her room, when they reached it, was larger than the entire flat she had shared with her mother in London. Your trunks arrived yesterday, Mrs. Harper said, gesturing to Amelia's two modest cases. Will you require help unpacking? No, thank you. I manage quite well. After the housekeeper departed, Amelia sank onto the bed, overwhelmed. The salary the Duke offered had been generous enough to secure comfortable lodgings for her mother with a respectable widow in Bath. The position itself, however, remained intimidating. 2 hours later, freshly changed into her best grey dress, Amelia stood before the Duke's study door. She had not yet seen the children, her charges, but had been informed they would be presented after her meeting with their father. She knocked, and a deep voice bade her enter. The Duke of Westmoreland stood beside a massive desk, a tall figure silhouetted against the window. As she entered, he turned, and Amelia's breath caught involuntarily. Society pages had not exaggerated his appearance. Dark hair swept back from a face that might have been carved by a sculptor with a particular appreciation for strong jawlines and brooding expressions. But it was his eyes that arrested her, grey as the stone of Thornfield itself, and equally cold. Miss Kearsley. He did not extend his hand, merely nodded. I trust your journey was tolerable. Yes, Your Grace. Thank you for the opportunity to let us understand one another clearly, he interrupted. I have engaged you because Lord Holloway vouches for your educational qualifications, despite your social difficulties. The children require instruction in the usual subjects, mathematics, literature, French, deportment. What they do not require is unnecessary emotional entanglement. Amelia straightened her spine. I assure you, Your Grace, I am quite capable of maintaining appropriate boundaries while still providing the children with the attention they deserve. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she had not cowered before his coldness. The previous governesses found the twins difficult. Children who have suffered loss often are, she said quietly. His jaw tightened. My children have everything they could possibly need. Except, perhaps, a father who speaks to them, Amelia thought, but wisely kept to herself. May I meet them now? He rang a bell, and minutes later, the door opened to admit two small figures. Alice and Edward Thornfield entered with mechanical precision, both dressed in somber colors that emphasized their pallor. The girl had her father's dark hair, the boy his gray eyes, but both faces were expressionless masks no child should wear. Children, the Duke said stiffly, this is Miss Kearsley, your new governess. They executed perfect bows without a word or change in expression. I am very pleased to meet you both, Amelia said warmly, dropping into a curtsy that brought her to their eye level. I brought something I thought might interest you. From her pocket, she withdrew a small mechanical butterfly, its brass wings delicately hinged. My father made this. Would you like to see it work? For the first time, a flicker of curiosity crossed Edward's face. Alice remained impassive, but her eyes tracked the butterfly as Amelia wound the tiny key. The Duke cleared his throat. The children have a schedule, Miss Kearsley. Dinner is at 7. Lessons begin tomorrow at 8. He turned back to his papers, a clear dismissal. In the corridor outside, the children walked ahead of her like miniature soldiers. As they rounded a corner, Amelia released the butterfly, which fluttered its metal wings and spiraled through the air between them. Edward stopped abruptly, his eyes widening. Alice put out a tentative finger to touch a brass wing. It wasn't a smile. But it was a beginning. 2 weeks passed in a carefully orchestrated dance. Each morning, Amelia conducted lessons in the airy schoolroom overlooking the gardens. The children were unfailingly polite, mechanically obedient, and utterly without joy. They absorbed knowledge like sponges but volunteered nothing of themselves. The Duke remained a distant figure, appearing only to inquire about their progress in formal, weekly meetings that left Amelia feeling like an inadequate employee rather than the caretaker of his precious children. On the 15th day, rain trapped them indoors for afternoon exercise. Amelia found herself improvising. Have either of you ever built a fort? She asked, eyeing the schoolroom's furniture speculatively. Twin blank stares answered her. Well, then. Today we shall have a practical lesson in engineering and military history. She began moving chairs, draping blankets between them. Edward, those cushions will make excellent ramparts. Alice, we need a flag for our fortress. Slowly, hesitantly, they joined her. By the time they had constructed an elaborate castle of furniture, blankets, and books, Edward had forgotten himself enough to suggest improvements to the design. Alice had carefully crafted paper pennants for each turret. Amelia was demonstrating how to defend against a siege when the door opened. The Duke stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the transformation of his orderly schoolroom. Your Grace! Amelia scrambled to her feet, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. We were conducting a practical lesson on medieval fortifications. The children had gone rigid, their momentary animation vanishing like morning mist. I see. His expression was unreadable. Carry on, then. He turned to leave, then paused. Perhaps you might explain the strategic significance of the East Wall. Edward glanced at Amelia, who nodded encouragingly. It's the weakest point, sir, he said in a small voice. But we've reinforced it with mathematics books. Excellent thinking. For the briefest moment, something softened in the Duke's face. Mathematics has saved many a precarious situation. After he left, Alice whispered, is father angry? No, darling, Amelia assured her, heart aching at this first voluntary question. I think he was pleased to see your engineering skills. That night, a note arrived with Amelia's dinner tray, Miss Kearsley. While unorthodox, your methods appear to engage the children. You have my permission to continue such practical demonstrations, provided academic progress is maintained. Westmoreland. It wasn't much. But like the children's cautious engagement, it was a beginning. Spring gradually yielded to summer. The children began to thaw like the gardens outside, though their smiles remained rare treasures. Amelia established a routine that balanced traditional lessons with what she called practical applications, experiments, nature walks, and dramatizations of historical events. Alice proved to have a talent for drawing, while Edward displayed his father's head for mathematics. Both children, Amelia discovered, had inherited their late mother's musical ability, though neither had touched the pianoforte in the music room since her death. The Duke remained an enigma. Some days he would join their lessons briefly, asking pointed questions that revealed his own excellent education. Other days he was a shadow glimpsed in doorways, watching silently before disappearing to attend to estate business or correspond with London associates. On the first truly warm day, Amelia took the children to the lake for a natural history lesson. They were carefully collecting specimens for a terrarium when Hoofbits approached. The Duke dismounted from his stallion with fluid grace. "I thought I might find you here." It was a favorite spot of, he stopped abruptly. Of mothers, Alice finished quietly. A heavy silence fell. "Yes," he finally said, his voice rough. "She loved the water lilies." "I don't remember," Edward admitted, his face crumpling. Amelia's heart twisted. She stepped back, preparing to give them privacy, but the Duke's eyes met hers, not cold now, but desperate, silently pleading for help. "Perhaps," she suggested gently, "His Grace might tell you about some of Lady Thornfield's favourite things while we complete our collection." It was awkward at first. The Duke spoke haltingly, as if the words caused physical pain. But gradually, the story of Caroline Thornfield emerged, her love of music, her skill at chess, her habit of reading Shakespeare aloud during thunderstorms. When they returned to the house, Alice slipped her small hand into her father's. His face registered shock, then wonder. That evening, a package arrived at Amelia's door, a rare botanical text she had mentioned wishing to consult for the children's studies. The accompanying note read simply, "Thank you." St. Summer advanced, bringing with it a steady stream of invitations the Duke invariably declined. County families were eager to pay court to Westmoreland, regardless of his reclusive reputation, and several specifically mentioned eligible daughters. "His Grace won't go," Mrs. Harper confided to Amelia as they watched the children playing on the lawn. "Not since the Duchess passed. Society gossips called him the Winter Duke even before the tragedy. Now he's practically a hermit. The children need more companionship than just each other," Amelia mused. "And perhaps the Duke does as well." An idea took root. The estate's midsummer festival had been abandoned after the Duchess's death, but reviving it could provide controlled socialization without forcing the Duke into London society. When she proposed the idea during their weekly meeting, she expected resistance. Instead, he studied her thoughtfully. "You believe this would benefit the children?" "I do. They've progressed remarkably in their studies, but they need to practice social skills with peers. A small gathering, just local families, would be an ideal opportunity." He tapped his fingers on the desk, a rare display of indecision. "The arrangements would be considerable." "I would handle everything, Your Grace." The children could help plan appropriate activities as part of their lessons. "Very well." He looked away. "But I expect you to maintain decorum, Miss Kearsley. Your position here is one of trust." The implied reference to her scandal stung. "I have never betrayed a trust in my life, Your Grace," she said quietly. "Despite what London gossips might say." His eyes snapped back to hers, something like shame crossing his features. "I spoke out of turn. Forgive me." The simple apology, so unexpected from his aristocratic height, rendered her momentarily speechless. "There is nothing to forgive," she finally managed. "We all have pasts that follow us." His gaze lingered on her face, searching. "Yes," he said softly. "We do." The festival preparations transformed Thornfield Park. Servants polished long-neglected silver, gardeners coaxed the formal gardens into spectacular bloom, and most remarkably, the children threw themselves into the planning with unprecedented enthusiasm. Edward designed mathematical games for the children's tournament, while Alice created delicate paper decorations for the refreshment tables. Both children spent hours practicing their musical pieces for the informal concert. Even the Duke emerged from his solitude, inspecting arrangements and making suggestions with growing animation. Amelia often felt his eyes following her as she moved among the workers, but whenever she turned, his expression was carefully neutral. 3 days before the festival, a letter arrived bearing Amelia's mother's handwriting. She broke the seal eagerly, having received no correspondence for several weeks. The contents turned her blood to ice. "My dearest Amelia, I write with most disturbing news. Lord Penrose has been making inquiries about your whereabouts, claiming to have unfinished businesses with you. Mrs. Winters overheard him boasting at a party that he would finish what he started with you. I fear his intentions remain dishonorable. Take care, my darling. Perhaps it would be wise to inform the Duke of these threats, as your employer should know of anything that might disrupt his household. Your loving mother." Amelia's hands trembled as she refolded the letter. Lord Penrose had been humiliated by her rejection, but she had never imagined he would pursue his vendetta to Thornfield. The festival would make her presence known to local society, and gossip travelled swiftly to London. She should tell the Duke. But doing so would mean explaining exactly what had happened in London, revisiting a humiliation she had worked so hard to leave behind. And what if he believed Penrose's version? She would lose not only her position but also Alice and Edward, who had finally begun to trust her. The Duke found her in the library that evening, comparing musical selections for the concert. "Miss Kearsley." He hesitated in the doorway, uncharacteristically tentative. "I wondered if you might advise me on something." "Of course, Your Grace." He crossed to the pianoforte, where scattered sheet music lay. "The children have asked if I might join them for their performance. I haven't played since." He trailed off. "Since Lady Thornfield died," Amelia finished gently. He nodded, fingers brushing the keys without pressing them. "Caroline and I often played duets. It was our private joy. And now you fear betraying her memory by playing again." His head snapped up, grey eyes wide with surprise at her perception. "Yes." Amelia moved to stand beside him, close enough to see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. "Your children have her musical gift. Playing with them honors her memory, rather than betraying it. You speak as one who understands loss." "My father died when I was 17, she said quietly. "Mathematics was our shared language. For a year afterward, I couldn't solve even simple equations without weeping. What changed? I realized that every time I solved a problem, I was keeping part of him alive." She smiled sadly. "Grief doesn't end, Your Grace. But it transforms." His hand moved as if to touch hers, then withdrew. "Sebastian," he said abruptly. "I beg your pardon. My name. When we are not in formal company, I would prefer you use it." The intimacy of the request, so far beyond the bounds of propriety between employer and governess, left her breathless. "I don't think that would be appropriate." "Nothing about this household has been appropriate since you arrived with your mechanical butterflies and blanket forts," he said, a hint of wry humor softening his features. "One more impropriety hardly signifies." The letter from her mother weighed heavily in her pocket. She should tell him about Penrose now, while he was approachable. Instead, she heard herself say, "Very well, Sebastian. But only when we are alone." The smile that transformed his face made him suddenly, devastatingly handsome. "Thank you, Amelia." She fled shortly after, her heart racing with emotions she dared not name. The day of the festival dawned clear and warm. Amelia woke early to supervise last-minute arrangements, pushing aside both her worries about Penrose and her increasingly complicated feelings for the Duke, for Sebastian. By noon, the first carriages were arriving. Local gentry, tenant farmers and their families, and even a few more distant connections who happened to be in the county all streamed onto the estate grounds. The children, resplendent in their finest clothes, greeted guests with newfound confidence. Sebastian himself moved among the attendees with a grace that belied his years of seclusion. If some guests were surprised by the Winter Duke's apparent thaw, they were too well-bred to show it. "You've worked miracles," Lord Holloway murmured to Amelia as they watched the Duke laugh at something Alice had said. "I haven't seen him like this since before Caroline died." "The children have done the real work," Amelia deflected. "They just needed encouragement. As did their father." Holloway studied her with uncomfortably perceptive eyes. "He speaks highly of you, you know. In fact, he speaks of little else in his letters." Heat crept into Amelia's cheeks. "I'm merely doing my duty." "Indeed." His knowing smile suggested he believed otherwise. "Oh, I should warn you, I heard Lord Penrose may be visiting his aunt in the neighborhood. Given your history, you might wish to, Miss Kearsley." Edward appeared at her elbow, excitement making him careless of adult conversation. "Father says it's time for the musical performance." The concert was the undeniable highlight of the festival. Alice played a delicate Mozart piece with technical precision that brought tears to many eyes. Edward followed with a more robust selection that showcased his natural talent. Then Sebastian joined them at the pianoforte for a trio arrangement of a popular ballad. As their music swelled in perfect harmony, Amelia felt her throat tighten with emotion. This was what she had hoped for, not just children learning to smile again, but a family healing together. The applause was thunderous. Alice actually smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed her solemn little face. Edward bowed with newfound confidence. "And Sebastian?" Sebastian looked directly at Amelia, his eyes conveying a message too complex for words. The moment shattered at a voice from the crowd. "Charming. Though I wonder what influence has prompted our reclusive Duke to such public displays." Lord Penrose stood at the edge of the gathering, his handsome face set in a mocking smile. He raised his glass toward Amelia. "Miss Kearsley, what a surprise to find you here, in such an intimate position within the household." A murmur ran through the guests. Sebastian's expression darkened dangerously. "Lord Penrose," he said coldly, "I don't recall issuing you an invitation. My aunt, Lady Merriweather, included me in her party." Penrose's eyes never left Amelia. "I couldn't resist the opportunity to renew my acquaintance with Miss Kearsley. We have unfinished business, don't we, my dear?" Sebastian stepped forward, but Amelia laid a restraining hand on his arm. "There is no business between us, Lord Penrose," she said clearly. "Nor has there ever been, despite your claims to the contrary." "Come now," Penrose laughed. "Such modesty. After those passionate letters you fabricated after I refused your advances," Amelia interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I have never written you a single word, sir, and we both know it." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Penrose's face darkened with anger. "You little, that's quite enough." Sebastian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "You will leave my home immediately, Lord Penrose, or I will have you removed." Penrose's eyes narrowed. "Defending your governess's honor, Westmoreland? Or is she more than that? Society already whispers about why you've kept such a notorious woman near your impressionable children." Sebastian's hand clenched into a fist, but before he could respond, Alice stepped forward, her small face set in determination. "Miss Kearsley is the most honorable person I know," she announced in a clear, high voice that carried across the suddenly silent gathering. "She taught Edward and me that truth matters more than what people say. And the truth is, you're a liar, sir." The collective gasp from the crowd was followed by scattered applause. Lord Holloway stepped forward. "I believe Lady Merriweather is preparing to depart, Penrose. You wouldn't want to keep her waiting." Humiliated and outnumbered, Penrose retreated, but not before hissing to Amelia, "This isn't finished." As the crowd dispersed to other activities, Sebastian took Amelia's elbow, guiding her toward a secluded corner of the garden. "You should have told me about him," he said quietly. "I only learned he was making inquiries a few days ago," she admitted. "I should have spoken up." "Yes, you should have." His expression softened. "But I understand why you didn't. Trust doesn't come easily to either of us." "Sebastian." She hesitated, acutely aware of his hand still on her arm. What Lord Penrose implied about gossip is already circulating, yes. His jaw tightened. James warned me. Then you understand I cannot stay. The words felt like stones in her throat. My presence compromises your position and the children's. No. His grip tightened. I won't let you leave because of malicious gossip. Not again. It's not just gossip now. It's your reputation, your children's future. A duke cannot afford to be linked with a disgraced governess. Something flashed in his eyes, determination, perhaps, or resolve. Then we must change your position. I don't understand. Marry me. The words hung between them, impossible and breathtaking. Amelia shook her head, certain she had misheard. Your Grace, Sebastian, he corrected gently. And I am perfectly serious, Amelia. You cannot possibly want, I want exactly what I have said. He took both her hands in his. I have watched you bring light back into my children's lives, and into mine. You challenge me, understand me, make me remember what it is to truly live. Is it so impossible to believe I might love you for that? Love, she echoed weakly. Yes, love. A smile tugged at his mouth. I believe I began falling in love with you the moment you built that ridiculous fort in my schoolroom. I simply didn't recognize it until much later. But society can go hang. He pressed her hands to his chest, where she could feel his heart beating rapidly. I've spent too many years caring about propriety at the expense of happiness. I won't do it anymore. Hope bloomed in Amelia's chest, fragile but insistent. The children adore you. As do I. His eyes searched hers. Do you think you might come to care for me as more than your employer? A laugh escaped her, half joy and half disbelief. Sebastian, I have been fighting my feelings for you for months. I never dared hope, he kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that deepened as she responded. When they parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes, Miss Kearsley? Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything. From somewhere nearby came the sound of childish giggling. They turned to find Alice and Edward watching from behind a rosebush, both wearing identical grins. Does this mean Miss Kearsley will be our new mother? Edward asked boldly. Sebastian extended his hand, drawing the children into their embrace. If she'll have all three of us, yes. Alice looked up at Amelia with solemn eyes. Mother would have liked you, she said with the certainty of childhood. She always said father needed someone to make him smile. As Sebastian's arms tightened around his newfound family, his smile, rare and wonderful, was all the answer Amelia needed. The wedding took place in early autumn, when Thornfield Park's gardens blazed with colour. Society gossips were scandalized, of course, but the Duke of Westmoreland's influence silenced the worst criticisms. Lord Penrose, facing mounting gambling debts and the discovery of his numerous falsehoods, departed for the continent shortly after the festival, effectively ending his campaign against Amelia. Lady Amelia Thornfield, once scorned by society ladies, found herself the mistress of one of England's great estates and mother to two children who had finally remembered how to smile. Her own mother moved into the dowager cottage on the estate, her health improving dramatically in the country air. On the night of their wedding, as they stood together on the terrace overlooking the moonlit gardens, Sebastian wrapped his arms around his bride. Happy, he murmured against her hair. Completely. Amelia turned in his embrace. Though I'm not entirely certain I'm qualified to be a duchess. You're qualified to be exactly who you are, he said firmly. The woman who taught not just my children, but their father, the most important lesson of all. And what lesson is that, Your Grace? Sebastian's smile, once so rare, now came easily to his face. That love, my duchess, is worth every risk.